So she's a saint who doesn't have a feast day. She doesn't wear a halo. You won't find relics of her body parts in museums that have been there for hundreds of years. You won't find her etched on the stained glass in the beautiful cathedrals of the world, because she walks with us in our hearts, in our relationships, and our lives. Can you guess what her name is? Saint Honesty. You guys are good. You're ready for the riddle fest, if there is such a thing. So that is the title of the song that Lisa just sang, that Sarah Bareilles sings and co-wrote. Saint Honesty calls us into freedom. Honesty baptizes us in truth. Honesty deepens our connections and helps us align with the divine nature, the truth of who we are. So when we treat honesty as a spiritual presence, when we invite her in as a holy companion, we really imbue the idea of truth and honesty beyond the idea of just it being a moral or ethical idea, to be a good person, to be honest, to not cheat others, etc. There's so much more to this idea. And so I want to invite you to invite Saint Honesty to be your holy companion, at least for this morning, if not for the rest of your lives. A child once asked their grandfather, "Grandpa, what's the secret to peace?" And the grandpa said, "When your thoughts and your actions and your words are all the same, then you're at peace." So true, isn't it? When all these things line up, another word for honesty, another kind of honesty, integrity, right? The integrity of that flow. And that's Saint Honesty at work in us, when those things all come together. You know, over the summer, we've talked about right thought, and we've talked about right action as a part of our 5 Basic Principles series. But I'd be remiss to not bring into that, particularly that co-creative third principle, right speech. Because the word itself is creative. You know, we think of something, or a divine thought comes to us, and through us, maybe in a vision or in a meditation. And what allows it to be manifest in the world is that you bring it in, right? And you speak it. You put clothes on that idea. You move it into the manifest world with the power of the word. John speaks about this really powerfully. He says the word itself is what creates, and there's a becoming of the word itself, the manifestation of the word itself. When he opens the book of John with, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word became flesh." And so it's this idea that as we talk today about words, we're talking not just about words. I'm using words to talk about words, but they're not just words, right? That we're talking about specifically truth, specifically honesty, the kinds of words that put us in the lane of truth. And those can be the emotional truth, right? The truth of how I feel, the truth of my human expression, the truth of my human experience, how I'm feeling right now, what I'm needing right now. That kind of, I'll call it small t truth. And it can also be factual truth in the world, right? So we have fact checks all the time on the media. When politicians are speaking, there'll be fact checks sometimes, I should say all the time. Maybe more often would be helpful. But anyway, that's another thing for another day. But there's factual truth. There are things that can be scientifically proven or can be proven otherwise in various ways, right? And then there's the spiritual truth. Then there's that truth that really ultimately sets us free, because it opens us up to who we really are at the base of us and grounds us in that all-loving presence. So you could say honesty sometimes can feel pretty risky. You ever feel that way about being honest? Oh, yeah, there's a lot of oohs in the room. I don't know if you all heard that online. Because it makes us feel vulnerable sometimes or uncomfortable, or can be in times of maybe some conflict or dissonance of some kind, whether it's within or without. There is that sense of, I have to take a risk here to be really honest with myself or with the other person. But you know, that specific word that John spoke of in this idea of creation, that the word became flesh, that word was Jesus that he was speaking of. And we know those enduring words of Jesus, the truth shall set you free. The truth on every level and every layer will set you free. He didn't say all that, but he was speaking probably mostly of spiritual truth, of divine truth. But I think, Jesus was a really real guy. He was really, he was in the world too. He always told us he wasn't of it, but he reminded us he was in it. And so too are we, right? In the body, in the experience, in the relationship. So there are times we just have to be in that human aspect of telling the truth as well. That song we heard just now speaks of honesty as a cleansing rain. I love that metaphor because that is what it feels like when we've sort of unburdened our heart, right? And connected perhaps with another, or just felt that sense of the rain cleansing and purifying and renewing us in some way. And what happens, and let's go all in for a moment, what happens if we're in the rainstorm of honesty, right? Or a rainstorm. Let's just go with a rainstorm. What we tend to do as adult children will play in a rainstorm, right? They love the puddles and the rain and the experience. They'll drink the rain. They'll open their mouths and dance in the rain. Maybe you do all those things too. But you also might be one of those people that, what we first tend to do is kind of hunker down, right? Look for shelter, get under a tree, find an overhang. We want to get out of the storm. We want to, preserve our dignity, keep our clothes dry, keep our hair together, whatever it is that we think is going on there. But when you let yourself go, if you've ever done that in a rainstorm, if you've ever danced in a rainstorm or really let yourself experience it, suddenly we give over to a more authentic experience of more playful, more childlike, more fun, right? More joyful. And then there is that experience, perhaps laughter that comes with that as well. So that metaphor really gives us that sense of, risky at first sometimes, truth-telling, honesty is, and yet it can open us, it can free us in such a way that joy then has room to move in our lives and in our hearts. Just as rain brings life to earth, truth brings life to the soul. Honesty or truth brings life to the soul. And when we allow ourselves to be drenched in rain, drenched in truth, we are refreshed, renewed, reborn. All of these things can happen. Honesty clears away illusion, and it awakens us to who we are. So that inner voice of Saint Honesty is always speaking to us, and it might say something like, "You're not going to melt." Maybe it will even be a joyful experience. So stop resisting and let the truth wash over you. Let the truth move through you. Let it be said. Sarah Bareilles sings, "Baptized by truth, we will reap what we sow. Build our own higher ground when the rain's coming down." I invite you just to close your eyes for a minute, and I'm going to say that again, and just really take it in for yourself. Baptized by truth, I will reap what I sow. Build my own higher ground when the rain's coming down. Where do you need higher ground in your life right now? And where would you like to invite the rain of honesty? Or maybe you feel the rain of honesty wants to come in and heal and cleanse and renew you and nourish you. There's an old Indian from the country of India folklore story called The Cracked Pot. And the story is about a water bearer who has 2 earthen pots that she carries on a long pole to the river every morning to refill them for the day's water. And it's kind of a long journey, so it's a big deal to take this journey every day. It's a big part of her work and experience and contribution to her home. And there's that one of the pots is fully whole and always comes back full. And the other pot usually comes back half full because it's cracked on the side. Now that little cracked pot over the years starts to tell itself a story about how it's not really living up to the measure of its worth, that it's not really on purpose, that it's not giving to the kind and wise water bearer what she needs, and that this long, arduous journey that she takes every day, that it's causing her more work. And the little cracked pot is thinking maybe she should just replace it as much as it doesn't want to be replaced. And so as it tells itself the story over and over again, the pain and the shame begins to increase until one day it finally cannot keep it in anymore. And when they're sitting by the river and the water bearer's refilling the pots, the cracked pot finds its voice at last. At first the voice is weak, but then it begins to speak a little louder. And it says to the water bearer, if you want to replace me, I would understand. I'm really sorry. All these years you've been coming all the way down to the river, and then you come all the way back, and I'm only giving you half the water. And the other pot is perfect and whole. I'm nothing like that other pot. The water bearer listened with compassion and surprise because she didn't feel that way about the cracked pot at all. So she said to the cracked pot, on our journey back home, I want you to do something. I want you to look up and then look off to the side and notice all the beauty you've brought into my life. The cracked pot was confused, but decided to heed the words of the water bearer. So when she hoisted the long stick with the 2 earthen pots on her shoulders and began the journey home, the cracked pot heeded it and looked up and over. And to the crackpot's great surprise, there was a resplendent garden of wildflowers all along the path, in that very line where the crack was on the side of the pot. You see, that water bearer in her wisdom had thrown out some wildflower seeds along that pathway, knowing that the cracked pot was going to lose water along the way. What's really instructive, well, there are lots of things about this story, of course, but one of the things that I really notice is the big shift that occurs in the story for the cracked pot is when the cracked pot finds its voice and speaks its truth and is honest about how it feels and what its concerns are. Have you ever been like that cracked pot, carrying around something in shame and secrecy and telling yourself a story and digging in on that story, and then one day somebody kind and loving hears you, and suddenly it's out in the light. I heard somebody audibly sigh a moment ago. And what does it do for us, right? It lightens us, it brightens us, it frees us. It allows us to see where we might have been mistaken all this time, where there might have been faulty thought, a false idea, a limited idea about ourselves suddenly illuminated. It's not even true. Wow. And so that is the invitation for us to open ourselves to where we are holding things in that really need to be spoken. Where do you feel that push? Maybe you've even gotten to the point where you feel the pain of holding something in. Aeneas Nin talked about that. When the bud gets, the bud that is about to bloom gets so tight and there's so much pressure in that bud, that's when you have to speak, right? So it can bloom. You have to allow the blossoming to occur. And so for you, there may be that point happening right now in your life, or perhaps it has happened to you before. Bringing our perspective and wounds into the light by speaking them aloud does so much for ourselves, our relationships, and it opens us to spirit. It opens us to divine light and to divine love and to be that channel and to get into that sink of integrity that grandfather's wisdom talked about. Thoughts and words and actions. Somebody said to me between services, an honest person doesn't have to remember as much. It's so true, isn't it? You're unburdened by all that stuff. Oh, that's right. Wait, I put that mask on when I'm with this group, and I put this mask on when I'm over here. When I'm having that conversation with that person, I better put that big, thick mask on and the shield too, And it's like you got to remember all that. What if we just let it all down and lived in the truth, in the honesty? Took Saint Honesty as our holy inner companion and guide. So the small T truth and the big T truth are always kind of in interaction with one another, The small T meaning the things that we feel or that we think that we just really need to unburden our hearts with, and they might not even be true, like the cracked pot, but it's just we need to talk about what's going on for us? What are we feeling? What are we perceiving? And that opens the way to the big T truth, right? The divine truth. It's like an excavation of the truer self that occurs from our self-inquiry and from our sharing with one another. And similarly, on the other end, when we affirm and bless and we hold ourselves in the principle of that big T truth, of that divine truth, when we stand firm in those places of principle and we say, I know these truths. I know I am divine. I know I'm here to shine light and to be love. And I know this about the people around me. And I feel the joy of that. When we begin to speak and rain and shower ourselves with that kind of prayer, then it also helps us with those other small T truths because we feel better and we think more clearly in this kind of alignment. So it's always this, humanity-divinity dance that's going on, heart and soul dance that is happening in us and through us and as us and in our relationships. There is a difference between brutal honesty and sacred honesty. And I think it's important to make that distinction, right? You all laugh because you've been there, right? Probably on both sides, often on both sides of these equations. Sacred honesty liberates us. Brutal honesty can wound, right? And so usually not our intention, but it can have that impact. Years ago, I went to a workshop that was circulating around or had started to circulate around called Radical Honesty. Anybody ever hear that? Oh, a couple of people have heard of it. Okay. So when I went, it was all about, the way that it was presented was, it was all about just put it all out there. Like just say what be real, be authentic, say what you need to say, and then you just stay to do the cleanup work, to, stick around to be with that person through the feelings, through the woundedness, So I thought this was a game changer. And I went home and told my partner at the time, I said, oh, this workshop was fantastic. Told her all about it, and I said, do you want to practice it? She said, all right. I said, you want to practice it now? She said, all right. I was like a puppy. I was so excited. You know how it is when you get turned on to something new spiritually and you get kind of like that? So she goes, you go first. So I started in. I don't know if it was 30 seconds or a minute in, she put her hand up. And she said, never mind, I don't want to practice radical honesty. So I was pretty green at the practice, so I imagine, it wasn't really delivered very skillfully. And I'm surprised some of you knew the workshop because I never heard of it ever again. I thought maybe it just went away because it just was... People were like, yeah, no. It was a good idea, but, in reality. So really what we're talking about is speaking the truth in love, right? Ephesians 4:15 says, "Speak the truth in love and you will grow in Christ." Speak the truth in love and you will grow in Christ. And we know that, we understand that to mean grow in the Christ consciousness. Grow in your divine nature by speaking the truth in love. Well, we're not always super skillful, right? It does take practice. It is going to be clunky. It will sometimes take risk and vulnerability, and we aren't going to always do it perfectly. We could be like the cracked pot, though, right? We're watering seeds, and over time, those seeds turn into a beautiful garden. So being honest with ourselves and being honest with each other and recognizing that this is a practice. I'm in practice here, and I want to practice with you. Would you be willing to practice with me? Know that, all that up front might be helpful, right? Know that I might say something, and, it might sound hurtful, and that is certainly not what I'm trying to do here. What I'm trying to do, what I want to do, what I invite us into is more intimacy, more closeness, more depth in our relationship, more flow in our sharing. And if somebody else is up for that, and they kind of understand that we're both going to be a little clunky, there's a willingness maybe to share at that level. I wish I would have known then to set all that up, but hindsight's 20/20, as they say, right? So there are three key ways, or there are probably many ways, but I'm just going to highlight three key ways that we've kind of alluded to throughout this time together of how we can work with and walk with St. Honesty and invite St. Honesty into our lives and to be our guide. So the first is to be honest with yourself. To notice where your inner truth and your external truth don't seem to be matching up. And where you notice that mismatch, that dissonant feeling, that sense of contrast, there could be a little work to do. So just inquiring within yourself, what is true? What is true for me? What is the honest truth for me? And beginning to clean that up inside helps free up your heart and allow you to see the path more clearly. Also, going forward, keep your promises to yourself. So often we say, I'm going to, do that later that I love to do, or I'm going to take care of myself later after I take care of all my family members in my workplace. And, but later never comes, right? Unless we prioritize that self-love, right, Catherine? We're all about it this afternoon. So it's that, right? To be good to ourselves, to create that kind of priority in our lives. To be honest with others is the second way. Of course, we've talked a lot about that today. To speak the truth in love and set aside, if we can, as much as we can, those ego masks so that our hearts can be revealed. That's the key, right? To be able to set that aside and let our hearts be revealed. A very different way of really having the truth flow through us much more easily and effortlessly. And when it feels risky, remember Sarah's song where she says, stay in the honest conversation, essentially. She says, oh, we won't let go. We'll be soaked to the bone. This is worth it to me, St. Honesty. And so it's that commitment. It's worth it to me, even though it may be hard, to stay the course of truth because of all that will open for me and free up and clarify and deepen for me in my life. Honesty can be a thunderstorm that clears the decks, or it can be a soft rain that replenishes and renews and brings a sense of rebirth and quenches that inner thirst, whatever that inner thirst is, for connection, for intimacy, for understanding, for guidance. It can be endless, for love, and so on. Elder Hazel Dixon is a storyteller with the Ojibwe and Mohawk traditions, and she says it's the highest honor to say about somebody that there walks an honest person. They can be trusted. And then she says, that honest person who has nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of, that honest person, they say, has a spirit like a sabi. A sabi is like a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. So it's like that giant spirit, right? And so when we clean things up, and allow ourselves to be really honest with ourselves and with each other. That's the kind of spirit that we are inviting in. Not that you necessarily want to be a Sabi or a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, but you want probably to let that magnificent truth of who you are, that bigness of who you are in truth, that divine Christ self, to be the one that is walking, the one that is moving about the world, the one that is relating in the world. Yes? Yeah. So then finally, being honest with spirit, and of course spirit is us, but we also have this sort of relational perspective too. And so when we pray, that we let that be an honest expression of whatever is true for us. The psalmists have this down really well, crying out in frustration, "Oh, how long must I wait, O Lord?" Or wailing in grief, or rejoicing in gratitude. It's all there, the human experience. In Lamentations, pour out your heart like water in the presence. Pour out your heart like water in the presence. This actually gives us the practice, right? Is we pour out our hearts to ourselves, in our journals, in nature, to our spirit, as we let ourselves lament, or whatever we want to say that is present for us, words of truth as well that are affirmative and blessing words, and whatever that is true for us, letting it flow clears the path, allows everything to flow more easily. Our heart-centered truth-telling leads to greater spiritual understanding, leads to a greater experience of the spirit of who we are, leads us to become Saint Honesty herself. So I want to invite us into a prayer to close. If you wish to close your eyes, feel free, or however you're comfortable. So let's open our hearts to the holy presence. That holy presence that we are a part of, the Holy Spirit, the whole spirit of love, whatever you want to call it, the divine presence, the Christ consciousness. We open to that truth. We let it rain down upon us. Invite it to cleanse whatever might stand in our way. Wherever there is fear or uncertainty or shame or whatever keeps us from speaking the truth. We let her wash away our masks, our fears, our pretenses, and let ourselves stand soaked in the rain and the divine light and love, standing naked, letting that water rush down upon us, those words of truth rise up from within us, from deep within our hearts, to free ourselves, to open our path, to allow ourselves to be in relationship that doesn't require us to remember so much, but to just be fully present, baptized by truth. We ask Saint Honesty, bring it on, guide us, walk with us, come into our hearts and allow us to be the very embodiment of honesty, of truth-telling, of truth-living, of standing on the truth, of being that truth, of taking a stand for truth, of speaking our hearts and our minds, of allowing the divine to speak through us, to bring forth the ideas of honesty and authenticity and realness that is who we are as human beings, and marry it with the truth of the transcendent knowing of who we are. We are divine light, we are divine love, we are joy, we are the very embodiment of love on earth as truth. A long time ago, In the very beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, with your source, and the Word was made flesh, and it is you. It is you who has come to earth as that flesh, as that entity, as that embodiment, as that walking, moving, knowing, thinking, feeling being that is grounded in honesty and in truth, and is making a commitment today to be more honest, to be more clear, to be more connected, to be more free through the right speech, through the Word that created you from the very beginning and lives on through you as you co-create in truth. Let it be so. Thank you, Spirit. We bite forward that truth through these affirmations. Saint Honesty is my holy companion. I speak the cleansing rain of truth in all my relations. I am free, clear, and deeply connected. Let's say these affirmations together. Saint Honesty is my holy companion. I speak the cleansing rain of truth in all my relations. I am free, clear, and deeply connected. And so it is.